I think what's really neat to see in this enablement and this transition process is that I repeat myself every day, 10 times a day. I feel like a mom to their kids. But in the same breath of air, my favorite thing is that on a Tuesday morning, a seller comes to me and goes, I tagged my field and I don't see my record and I don't have my introduction. So it's neat when your sellers are telling you your enablement and why isn't it working?
Yeah.
So it's always kind of refreshing there at that point. You're like, let's see why it's not working. You're right.
Welcome to Unlock Cloud Go-to-Market, the series where hosts Erin Feiger and Patrick Riley share the essential stages of the Cloud GTM maturity model to start, optimize, and grow your company's revenue through the cloud. They've helped countless ISVs tackle the ins and outs of their Cloud GTM motion. And in each episode, they're sharing those success stories from the people who have put them into place. Because ultimately, this way of thinking is the future, and the future is now.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unlock Cloud Go-to-Market. I'm co-host Patrick Riley.
I'm co-host Erin Feiger.
And today we're joined by guest Marissa Berardocco from HashiCorp. She's the North America Cloud Engagement Manager, and she talks to us about her transformation tower. And no, this is not in Mordor and has nothing to do with the Lord of the Rings, although she's got a golden ring of success happening right now, and we're going to dive deep into that.
Also, our conversation with Marissa, she talks about how she changed having what she calls a Barney conversation, just like a feel-good conversation, into really quality conversations with whoever you're trying to co-sell with. So I love that part of our conversation with Marissa.
So stay tuned for more, and we'll catch you in a minute. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unlock Cloud Go-to-Market. I'm co-host Patrick Riley.
I'm your co-host Erin Feiger.
And today we are super excited to be joined by none other than Marissa Berardocco, who is the AWS NAMER Cloud Engagement Manager at HashiCorp. Marissa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Patrick and Erin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hi, Marissa. It's so great to have you here. We're really looking forward to diving into your journey and learning more about your experiences and strategies in cloud partnership management. I love your background. I'm excited for the audience to hear you talk about coming from a traditional channel environment and into more of a hyperscaler cloud marketplace environment.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I've been with HashiCorp for almost 3 years, which feels like 3 lifetimes if you ask anybody around here. I was always in the data center and the backup space. So as customers' landscapes evolve, that's kind of just how you became more familiarized with the cloud, those hybrid type of environments. And it was a really unique change for me is that HashiCorp was one of the first companies that I worked at that you had the option for a direct sale. And any other previous tech roles, you had to rely on a reseller in that previous kind of relationship. So moving into the cloud space and looking at how co-sell operations and the inclusivity it brought was really kind of fascinating for me.
And when you first came over to Hashi, can you elaborate more on your role and responsibilities when you first joined versus what the organization looks like now and how that role has evolved for you?
Yeah. So what's really neat is that Erin, you were a huge part of it. And I can't go beyond that without it. Is that a good thing after you drink the company Kool-Aid, you actually really look into what do I do on a daily basis? Not what is the foundation around here. So that was it, is that I got to work with our Tackle managed service, previously Core Plus. And I moved in at the tail end of that foundation setting. And really, when I was hired, they're like, we have this thing called co-sell. We don't really know what it is or how to explain it. That's going to be your job. So,
And then you called me and you were like, what is this thing called co-sell? And I was like, okay, let me onboard you.
You made the right call.
It was one of those things. I'm like, there's this woman named Erin and everybody keeps saying that she did this. So why not go to the source itself? So I am very biased in a lot of regards because I got to learn what co-sell is from one of the best in the business. And she did not pay me to say that by coming on this podcast either. So
Yeah, we don't have sponsors for everybody
And
listening.
Hashi
And our
wasn't
sponsors.
necessarily paying me to train you. It was just
no.
you really wanted to learn, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, here's someone who really wants to learn about co-sell." And we just spent all this time just learning and sharing and talking about and training you up on not just what we were doing with Hashi and their co-sell managed service and how we had set up their co-sell operating model and what your role was going to be in that model, but just in general, like you were really curious about the industry, where the history of it, what is all this thing called co-sell, just as it relates to Hashi, but as it relates to the industry. So thanks
Yeah,
for being, a friend to talk to.
absolutely. And I will say for the other folks out there that, I mean, we look to relationship selling and reliance on those types of resources and support. And it's for the other folks is that I still did my due diligence for HashiCorp on the role. Is this the best in place? Is this what we should be doing? Is this what we should be following? And looking at the other industry partners and leaders, especially to see how they were gaining their success and their progress.
Yeah.
And if you ask them, co-sell is really wrapped around a lot of that too.
Yeah. And like we had the operating model already in place. Ashley had subscribed to the co-sell managed service offering. So we were doing like that operational layer. And then they hired you for a very specific role. It was new to Hashi because they needed help in a very specific way. Can you share what your charter was when you first came into Hashi to help support taking Hashi from that building adoption phase that we were in with them to really driving adoption inside of Hashi?
Yeah, no, and I think that's where my background really came into play of, hey, there's this channel of resources. How do you define channel, right? Not necessarily a reseller in particular. So my goal was primarily to really enable and train our field sellers on the operational processes, but more importantly, with how do you engage? What are you getting out of these conversations? What is marketplace and how do you necessarily plug it into this? So I think everybody in our market is really used to that old school channel and the fight to the deal reg with the timestamp. And you're very just limited to one box with one source and you're really kind of cut everybody out. Well, with co-sell, it's really that more holistic approach. I like to call it that and statement, right? You get to talk to your cloud partner, whatever's based on your customer's environment, and then be prescriptive with those service offerings and additional resources that fall under that category so you can be the most impactful. So that transition from traditional channel to co-sell cloud marketplace is really, I like to phrase it more as value selling than solution politics. So everybody working collective rather than, well, if you shift this, you're going to bump him out or her out or
Yeah. It's a different mindset, right? Like Hashi hired you to come in and really do a lot of field seller enablement because they needed to explain a way and enable their sellers to sell and partner solution sell differently than in the channel when it came to doing that with the cloud partners. And also in your role, you were handling all the inbound opportunities that were coming in because that also helped make sure the right messaging was getting out to the clouds. And you were using that inbound as another mechanism to reach out to your sellers to continue to transform the way they were used to selling from this traditional channel method to this cloud method. What were some of those like aha moments you had when you were training folks on like, this is the difference between channel and a traditional deal reg versus cloud marketplace and co-selling with the clouds?
right now, it's such a new conversation for a lot of people. I think Gartner quoted back in 2021, by 2024, 80% of technology products will be bought and sold by those that are not technology professionals. So we're technically living that future right now, if you want to nerd out on some stats with me. And I think that's where the idea of this co-sell and this cloud marketplace, it's not just new for us, it's new for everybody. I think COVID really accelerated this opportunity we have here. And when we look at the tackle cloud maturity model on how you're supposed to set yourself up as an ISV, we had our foundation. What we were doing is enabling, but bringing presence to these clouds so they kind of knew who we were and what we had to offer, incentives. So I always found in like one-on-one enablement, and you're going through those operations and showing your rep how and what to check and what they do next is, well, I'm in there with so and so. You're like, that's really great. That's one more player we get to add to this mix. You know that so and so can also transact our software through this cloud marketplace. So it's the idea of going beyond the transactional period, is that there is more relationship there that can be inclusive, that everybody can get a piece of the pie. So that's where you see the channel partner private offer.
So, Marissa, like we talked a lot about how you've spent time in enabling sellers who were traditional channel into this co-sell model and through marketplace. And that's a lot of enablement. It's not something easy. So I know it probably wasn't an easy task and you're probably still doing it today. But can you unpack a little bit on like how are you so successful in getting your sales team to make the shift in mindset from like direct sales to marketplace sales, and then marketplace sales to channel plus marketplace sales? Like, what was that? What were the kind of keys to success in there? And why was it important for you to help educate them on the co-sell aspect?
For sure. And I mean, it's a loaded question in itself. I just heard four and. It's like, how many more people can we include in this? So that's the biggest point of enablement, is that enablement is always going to be ongoing and consistent. So, like I had previously stated, one of the biggest aha moments in these conversations was somebody being like, I already have this relationship though. And you're like, well, guess what? This person can have a relationship with your cloud partner who we want you to engage with. So the other really crazy thing about the enablement conversation and where we kind of learn from relationships is that it was a very common cultural at HashiCorp to want to control the whole top of the sales funnel and not really thinking about the partner community until they needed help with technical validation or until they needed to be more personalized and prescriptive for the offer. And that's where later in the fact, marketplace comes into fruition. So sellers are almost shooting themselves in the foot by not having that collective conversation on the front because, like traditional resell, you have existing relationships that these consultants, we'll call them now, eat, breathe, and sleep this customer. So they have to kind of be engaged and involved. So they're not going to be eliminated. That's where the beauty of a cloud marketplace procurement vehicle is, it's inclusive to that partner. Everybody kind of gets their cut. And it's just a different form of payment in entirety, like a basic layman's terms, is that the relationships can still be capitalized on. And we know that everybody's not going to like each other. And I think that that's also a good thing to say, is that you're building trust with said partner, cloud or reseller. You need them to like you and they need to understand the value of your product, because they're then going to turn around and advocate for you. And we go back to that internal advocation being so critical, important, not only for your peers of hearing what needs to be caught on, but truthfully, the customer is going to do something because somebody they like and trust told them so. So shifting that traditional with the cloud partnership, that's just it. How can we get the best advantage and the best face in front of this customer? And again, you're more likely to buy something from somebody because you like them and you trust them.
Well, and more people, like, the more you understand who's talking to your customer and supporting your customer in a variety of different ways, it's important for you to build relationships or let those folks know that you're also talking to the same customer, because the more the customer hears and knows you're supported by other relationships they have in that account, like the more likelihood they are to want to do business with you, want to do more business with you because you're in that inner circle of trust.
And that's the whole concept of value selling rather than solution politics is that,
Yeah.
hey, everybody's getting an advantage here. We're just influencing your product to be that
Yeah.
much greater and
It
better.
switches from like, I put this deal in, I deal regged it to lock everybody out and protect my deal, to like, I'm going to go build relationships, find out everybody that's in there and make sure I'm building good relationships and building trust with my customer from all different angles.
Absolutely. And I think it's even a true testament for newer sellers coming into a company and absorbing pipeline and absorbing books of business that they may not have brought that relationship with them, right? So, what's a good starting point? Well, let's go to people that have already been in there. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and again, about channel partner inclusion of, well, this customer just really was in bed with this partner here. They're like, how do you know that? And I go, well, you couldn't do anything with them from any kind of caliber 3 years without them knowing. I go, that would be the best point to start. And they're like, huh. I said, well, they're either still in there consulting them and still in bed, or they know who shopped them out. So you're going to get some data point and a better entry start and knowing the who's who in the zoo to kind of get that, accelerate that opportunity and get your foot more in the door than you ever have been.
This whole process and getting your sellers to this point and coaching them through that is very much indicative of maturing org when we think about our maturity model. When we think about those first few stages with establishing foundation and then building adoption being the first two, where you started at HashiCorp was within that building adoption phase, but you're doing a lot of activities today, especially with the sellers that are in more of the driving adoption phase. And now I think Hashi as a whole is making that journey in various other aspects outside of the sales enablement and getting the sellers to look at relationships different and optimizing your co-sell with the tackle managed service and all the work you're doing. What else can you tell us or walk us through that are other activities that Hashi might be doing on this road to driving adoption?
No, awesome question. And I think it's something to say for others trying to model what good looks like and the success there is, Patrick, you kind of just pointed out, is that our co-sell operations and marketplace are a little bit more superior than where our sellers are at in this process, right? We're in scale, they're in adopting the mindset, right? So I think with that, it's really helped that the cloud partners have also culturally shifted to kind of meet us there. I think they're also seeing value in, hey, these co-sell conversations actually lead to organic marketplace conversations and more strategy for taking advantage of buckets of funding. But I think where we're going is that the adoption factor has happened in a lot of calibers over at HashiCorp, which is successful, is that we have the executive support and the executive sponsorship here. So we have a dedicated team that is two things where they're operationalizing us on the tackle platform. That was one of the biggest moves we had for this year, right? More automation built in. And then simultaneously releasing what we're calling a transformation tower. Hey, this is all the X, Y's, and Z's of how to engage with your cloud counterparts from the operational stance all the way through. So it has a place to live continuously. It has a checkbox and a work ramp training for the seller to take when they're embedded. So it's not just relying on one or two people. It's more of a broad brush stroke. So one of the other things that we've taken models of is that a couple of weeks ago, somebody had posted a blog of common language, how to talk to your cloud counterpart, is that everybody has their own phonetics. However, there is sales methodology in place. So they referenced it to MedPick. Well, what's really cool is that's what HashiCorp decided on that's what their sales methodology is. So we have our sellers thinking like our cloud partner sellers, but let's put these pieces together. So to get the most out of these cloud partner conversations, what I did specifically with AWS was I took an AWS template of, so again, visual. What are your three pillars? Speed, risk, efficiency, right? Growth. So I created this template, this value map template for our field to be more prepared when they get on the phone with these cloud partner conversations. And it aligns to the MedPick philosophy and methodology is, hey, this is what my lens of the business here. I'm here and I'm asking your support because I need your help filling in some of these boxes. You're going to help me. Why do anything? And what's it going to take to get there? Like, that's where I need your nuggets of knowledge and the power that you have within that to go forward. But I think that that's also holding teams accountable. It's in writing. You're not just showing up to what I know people like to call a Barney conversation, right? You're actually delivering actionables out of it. And it's just because you are talking the same language and you have this written document on the screen. It's pretty unique to see. I
And
think the
and in a
sales.
common language of like, you do med pick, I do med pick. So everyone's trained in the sales methodology. So you know when you're, hey, I need to strengthen this area of my understanding so I can strengthen my overall sales approach aligned to MedPick to really help me drive the right value and sale to this customer that supports both of our initiatives, both AWS and Hashi or whichever cloud you're talking with.
And I
Yeah.
love that. I bet your
Yeah,
CRO absolutely loves all of this, like the value map. I took my pen out. I know we're on a
I know.
podcast,
I wrote
but
down, I'm
I was
like,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
how do you like, did you go to him and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna turn our Barney conversations into med pick conversations." And was he like, "What's a Barney conversation?" And
I
you're
think
like,
a
"You
lot
know,
of
the
people are like,
song,
what
I
is
love
Barney?
you, you love me," right? Like, we're just gonna get on and be like, "Hey, I'm Erin, I'm Marissa." Like, what
This
are you
is
doing?
great.
What are you doing? Right? I can't. In the beginning days of co-selling with the clouds, I think a lot of partners are kind of like, I don't know what to do. I now have this person's name and, like stage fright. And so you end up with a lot of Barney conversations. And so it's like, I'm going to turn those into MedPick conversations.
Right. And I think that that's again where you have to look towards that enablement and understanding is that how can I make my sellers more comfortable, take their cards down a little bit and be more willing to have this conversation, right? I
Yeah.
think a part of those Barney conversations is as nice and lovey as they are, it's just a very tight tensioned phone call with no trust taking place at all.
Yeah.
So I think that this value map and being on the screen is allowing that card to come down of, hey, I'm looking to be collaborative. I don't want to
Yeah.
compete. I want to do something together.
Yeah.
So,
And bits and pieces of information starts to build bits and pieces of trust around a common language that you both know, continue to add some more trust as you get more and more trust, right? Like guard comes down more and more.
and you get your 3 or 4 pillars activated: your speed, risk, efficiency, and growth. Yeah, I like it.
yeah, well, so it's so neat that we're including it in the transformation tower. So it was a really like, hey, you formulated a tool that is going to be used and should be incorporated and viewed upon by sales leaderships as, hey, this is a critical piece to get the most out of these conversations and capitalize. I think our cloud partners are so large and prominent, but I think as ISVs, we kind of forget that enterprises are large. And even though our cloud partners are larger, they may not be in every sector or segment. So, this value map template aligns with, hey, are we in the same side of the business? And can we build pipeline off of each other? Can we make an introduction?
And I think your approach and how you've taken enabling the sellers, because that was one of the main initiatives you had when you first started, it shows it in the numbers. So one of the metrics when we first started co-sell managed service for Hashi, and this was pre you, was number of deals, like how much of my pipeline am I sharing with the cloud providers? And I think we were somewhere in that 10 to 15% of our pipeline was getting shared with the cloud providers. Then you come in, and part of that initiative was like, we took it from like 10 to 15 into like 20 to 30% of the pipeline just by purely operationalizing and driving operational efficiency. We were able to get, that incremental growth in a short period of time. Then you come in and you start to do all this enablement, and then the metric went from what to what. And I also know, like, when you first started, you guys were tracking your business one way. And can you share with everyone like some of the metrics you're using now as you're more in a driving and scaling maturity phase of your cloud strategy?
I mean, ideally, when I first started, you kind of looked at a pipeline report and you saw, you're like, wait, that should be the other way around. Is that we only had 10% of our opportunities shared with all three partners across the clouds, and 90% that wasn't. So as soon as that enablement started catching on, we moved through the cycles of 70-30. Now we were staggering about a 50-50 or a 60-40, 60 in our favor of actually shared pipeline. But I think that that's a testament to two factors of enablement overhead, but enablement to your sellers that this is a clean process, how we've talked through in this conversation. But I also think in the beginning of your co-sell with your cloud partner, you're building that same kind of adoption and trust on their side. So
Yeah.
just as much as we were sharing opportunities and not receiving anything back, I think that that's also where we've started to see that lull of reporting in collaboration.
Yeah, like, I remember when we first came in, it was, like, at 10%, then we focused on the operations, we got it to, like, 20, 30%, then they saw that benefit, and you came in and really focused on enablement, got it up to 40, 50. We started getting more inbound pipeline, and now we're more like 60-40 on a good month or a good quarter, but it definitely was, like, we operationalize, then to get that next push from building to driving, we got to really start to do the ad enablement piece. And then when all of that's kind of running, then we saw lots of inbounds coming in and was like, oh, thank God Marissa's here to help with all the inbounds.
Right. And I think that that's like a lost thought with some sales teams. And like the theme of our conversation here has been relationships. Is that if I'm a seller and I'm not including people into a sales opportunity and conversation, they don't know what's happening. They don't know how to solve. They don't know how to advocate for you. So, in lieu, they're not going to bring you opportunities. They're not going to help you extend and expand because they don't necessarily have an idea what's happening. And I think that's where you're almost cutting your flywheel by not bringing them in earlier in deals, rather they just be a fly on the wall. I think again, relationship building turns to internal advocacy, turns to stickier products.
Yeah. And some of your metrics have changed over time. Like the ones that you had when we initially started and then you initially came in are different from the ones you have now. Can you share with everyone some of those metrics that have changed over time and some of the metrics you're focused on now?
Yeah, and I think that that also goes like our measurements and metrics changed for our team because 3 years ago, the market in the world and the way co-sell was talked about is a lot different than it is today. So I think it's also that executive understanding and the value that they're bringing is again not like your traditional reseller VAR relationship. So you have to give to be able to get. And I think that's where the transition was, is that originally we were sourced on cloud in pipeline, which means what opportunities did the cloud partners bring us and source for a HashiCorp salesperson? And let me tell you, they were low
That was a hard year.
and it was a very hard year. And even just to validate it, you're like, you weren't here when this even got submitted. How do you know that you didn't create it? So I think it's also a really hard testament to validate. So we've then shifted into being metriced just like our cloud partners metric us. How many co-sell opportunities have you shared? How many has AWS shared with you or inbound referrals from a cloud partner? the number of marketplace transactions is equally as important as the TCV and the net ACV of those marketplace goals as well. So I think aligning to the way that the clouds have aligned to us, I think that's also helped with the uptick of shared opportunities. People are also starting to see the value of that. Or teams won before and they're still engaged with their cloud counterparts. And it's like, hey, one of us needs to put in this record. So I think what's really neat to see in this enablement and this transition process is that I repeat myself every day, 10 times a day. I feel like a mom to their kids. But in the same breath of air, my favorite thing is that on a Tuesday morning, a seller comes to me and goes, I tagged my field and I don't see my record and I don't have my introduction. So it's neat when your sellers are telling you your enablement and why isn't it working?
Yeah.
So it's always kind of refreshing there at that point. You're like, let's see why it's not working. You're right.
So, Marissa, when you think about these processes that you put in place, tackle with the managed service, the enablement of the sellers to actually go do a lot of the co-sell, the operational improvements you made on the back end, when you think about all these processes and becoming more efficient, how do you continue to do that on your flywheel, constantly updating and reducing churn with customers? Like, how do you ensure that that stays on the flywheel and that's something that continuously gets updated and progressed and doesn't fall off?
My manager and I, director of North America Partners, we've been inundated with this topic more recently is, well, HashiCorp is a difficult technology and we need services and we need to make sure that it's deployed so then the customer is able to use it after the fact. So we know with a point of sale to be most successful, services have to be paired with software. And sometimes that's more cumbersome than what HashiCorp can just offer directly. So that's where needing to be more reliant on our partner community that we do trust in to help deliver that for us. Because that's, again, what makes the flywheel go round. Engaging both types of partners earlier in the sales cycle to know what's happening after it's closed won. I also think from a personal standpoint, I think to make the most prescriptive SI, GSI reseller alignment, you need to pick your cloud partner first. So I think that's where it's just, again, that happy village of it's inclusive too. And I think that's where we're taking advantage of those existing relationships with those cloud counterparts. So we can do a cloud channel private offer through the marketplace. So everybody gets their box checked. Cloud partners getting their incentive. The reseller and or SI, GSI is not cutting it out of the opportunity. It's on their paper. So it's strengthening the relationship in numbers.
So you're doing a lot for where you are in your maturity and where you are in your journey. You all are constantly like pushing the envelope with, now we've got the ecosystem helping us. We've got our partners involved. Our sellers are understanding of this whole process. Like there's a lot of moving pieces in that puzzle, but you're also taking advantage of just about everything that there is out there today from like a marketplace trend or co-sell trends. So looking ahead, what are the focus areas for Hashi? Like knowing what you're working on now, is it really just optimizing some of those areas? Are there some new things that you're looking to do? What's the primary marketplace and co-sell focus area for the next year or so?
I think we're always going to continue to optimize. I think that's the beauty of the cloud environments is that there's always something coming out. And I think that's where I've sung Tackle's praises before is, hey, we get a consulting partner help us vet out all these changes so then we know how to go about it in a more efficient manner. So looking forward, I think the platform with the automation is going to help immensely with just hands on deck and being able to touch more people within these active co-sell conversations. Is that we're at a 50-50 share or a 60-40 share. If we go up to 80-20 or 90-10, like my goal would be, that's just that many more conversations and enablement and tracking. So we need the system software to enhance that. And I also think HashiCorp just signed our SCA agreement with AWS. So over the next 5 years, we have guaranteed funding. So I think that that also has been a really big eye opener to our internal company of like, hey, they're making this massive investment with us. There's money on the table to be had. how do we make sure we don't lose this? So we have internal team members being aligned to our cloud partner goals and our SCA goals. So it's just more those people have been enabled, they've been adopted. I think the maturity model, everybody's going to be at different points of time at every given point in time.
That's great. You got people aligned to the SCA too. Like that's a big deal. So congratulations to you all for that as
Yeah,
well.
it was a long time coming with lots and lots of people to be included and praised for it. But it's a testament to the partnership. And I think that's where I also like to tell our sellers is that we've experienced a massive cultural shift within our own company, but with our partner community. I'm sorry if you had a bad conversation 3 years ago, you're going to have an entirely different one now, not just because I said so, or not just because the SCA is in place, but because they see the power behind HashiCorp. They've seen the value in the numbers that we've put up in their marketplaces, and they want to collaborate.
All right, Marissa, with your extensive experience you've had from working in the channel to helping convert an organization to think about, yes, we have co selling with our channel partners and we have co selling with our cloud partners. And sometimes we're going to be co selling with all of them. The more, the merrier. With all of this experience, if you had to go back in time to your earlier self, just starting out at Hashi, what advice would you give yourself starting off in that role? Like what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, God. So the first thing that literally just comes to mind is be prepared to repeat yourself lots of times. Now, doing it so many times, I tell my newer sellers, hey, don't come to me in your first 2 weeks. Come to me in your third week or your fourth week. You'll stop drinking the Kool-Aid. What I say to you will saturate a little bit more. But I also know now from experience, hey, we're going to have this 30-minute conversation and we're probably going to have about two or three more after the fact. Because I think it's a lot of information and more new to wrap your mind around. So marinate, digest, come back to the table. And I think little bits and pieces, it goes a long way and you go a lot further. And I've seen that success from the other side of, hey, let's do 5 30-minute conversations. One of my sellers yesterday, she just closed her first cloud marketplace deal. Like it was just super excited to be like, hey, what I've told you in the last 6 weeks has worked. So to see success from that enablement and those conversations and just relying on that engagement, that I would say you're not going to get your message across the first time. You're maybe not the second. It's going to take a couple times. I mean, it took you a couple times telling me. So
Yeah,
it
I think that that's good advice. Like enablement isn't like a one and done, and that it is going to take multiple times of saying the same thing or working with that same person a couple of times in different ways to really get them properly enabled. I think they always say like you remember things in threes, and so it's like, all right, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you again, and I'm going to tell you one more time. I think also some of it is timing, right? Like I'm going to tell you this, and it's good that you have some of this like foundational information. And then when it comes time to start to really implement this, we're going to have another conversation. And now I'm going to go to like the 201 level.
yes.
And then in the actual actions and moments when it's happening, we're going to talk again. And I'm actually going to now be even more prescriptive and be at that 301 level or be giving you the FAQs because it's like real time happening. And that is the best way to enable is don't treat your enablement as like one and done. And I bet you
I
didn't
know. I
realize
think
that
it's
when you were starting out at Hashi.
no, and that's where I was saying, like, you're going to repeat yourself. You're going to recreate. You're going to have to come up with your same message, but in a different kind of format and way
Yeah.
of, but little bits and chunks. And I think, yes, for the newer sellers that you see this enablements work, but I also think it's really neat to see seasoned sellers who have prestigious accounts with the relationships that go with it. And they're coming to me asking to strategize and making sure they're getting the most out of these conversations. So, to your point, like, It's
Yeah.
not a one and done. You can be the expert and still want to collaborate and strategize in these conversations too.
And really using, you kind of used like your secret recipe and your sauce was, I'm going to spend a ton of time on enablement because I know enablement is one of our key success factors to creating the right momentum, and using co-sell as a way to give you that opportunity to do that enablement. It also helped you build relationships, and it then led to like more robust marketplace opportunities and just more robust programmatic approaches with your cloud partnership. I really love that. Like, one of your things you focused on was like enablement and how that really was a change factor for you guys.
Well, and I think you said something that gave me the thought, and I mentioned it before, is that we have to advocate internally, right? We sell and rely on relationships within our own companies and orgs. And I think that's the other two cents of in this enablement and getting in front of my sellers, they look to me as a trusted resource and advocate. So if they may be unsure of this cloud partner conversation, throw me on the call. I'll be the bad cop. I think that that's where you still rely on a relationship in a different way. So it's nice to see that the sellers are not just entertaining me, but trusting me as that resource to kind of be more open to the co-sell conversation.
Yeah. And co-selling more holistically. It's like we're going to co-sell with our channel partners, we're going to co-sell with our cloud partners, and it's not an or, it's an and. So initially it was one, maybe for a while it was one or the other, and now you're in this evolution where it's an and. We're going to
Yeah.
co-sell with our cloud and our channel partner because we know the secret to really driving Hashi's product to be used, to be scaled out, to be renewed, and get really sticky is making our product able to run in the clouds with the clouds and a channel partner to help implement that solution with our customers. I think
Yeah.
that's a great recipe you guys have there.
No, for sure.
Marissa, thank you so much for coming on our podcast of Unlock Cloud Go to Market and sharing some of your experiences on how you've been unlocking that potential and really creating that momentum and that shift inside of Hashi to doing more with the cloud partners and cloud partners plus channel partners.
Yeah. No, the more relationships, the better.
Thanks
Thanks
again,
for having
Marissa.
me. Pleasure. Yes. Thank you.
Voila, change shirts, Aaron.
I changed too.
That was an awesome chat we had with Marissa, though. I mean, the Transformation Tower, hearing her talk through like how they're trying to be faster, reduce risk, increase efficiency, drive more growth, and do all that through kind of their value engineering, which I really love to hear. Like, what were
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when she made that correlation that AWS uses Medpick, Hashi uses Medpick, she had that aha moment of, oh, this is going to really help us change our conversations and really drive more value. She created this value map template to help her sellers collect the right information when they go to co-sell with AWS. Everyone's speaking the same common language and it's building out their customer intelligence aligned to their sales methodology of using Medpick. It's
Yeah,
like,
super great. I know that was awesome. And I know you and I took some MedPick courses a while back and figuring out how the marketplace is integrating. AWS is using it, as you mentioned, and that's a core competency that they've talked through. A lot of our customers are also using it. And I think there's a lot to that, incorporating your sales methodology, whatever that may be, whether it's Medic or MedPick or not, into how to have conversations, how to drive more co-sell. Like,
yeah.
I think those are
And if
all
you're
great
not
things.
using Medpick, it's like, if you have a different methodology, what are the similarities so that you can say like, hey, we sell this way and here's how this is showing up over here, whether it's AWS with Medpick, Microsoft has their own methodology that they use, MSAM. So it's like understanding that there might need to be this translation and making sure everybody like at least can do that translation. And so you can still get that information you need and sell in the way that you're used to selling. Yeah.
What'd you think about the channel correlations?
Oh my gosh. Like I had forgotten that Marissa had came from a more traditional channel environment. And also like I knew Hashi had a huge channel, but that really there's a difference in how you are co-selling in the channel to co-selling with the cloud partners. So making sure everybody understands those differences and then saying, okay, but we can still co-sell across our ecosystem and include all of the partners, handling each of them respectively in their own ways, but yet collectively we're all working with this customer on this initiative to help them solve their business problems.
Yeah, she unpacked a lot there. Marissa's been a longtime friend of Tackle, a longtime friend and customer of yours.
Yeah.
And she definitely gave us a lot to think about as far as how HashiCorp is moving from building adoption, driving adoption into scaling adoption. So
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like Hashi was a customer both of Core and Tackle, probably at the same time we were helping Hashi, right? We were doing it individually. And so then when Core joined forces with Tackle, we brought this all together. I know the Hashi team was like, this is so great. Like, we use both of you. We love both of you. You help us in so many different ways. So now being able to bring all of this into one solution and really give them one platform to standardize their operations across using prospect intelligence, co-sell and marketplace, all inside of Salesforce, I think is contributing to their ability to integrate this more into that transformation tower and really drive adoption and scale adoption. All right. So, Patrick, what was one of your kind of key takeaways from the conversation with Marissa that really like left you going, "Ah, I totally agree."
yeah, I think mine was the enablement piece. It falls short so many times where people are like, yeah, I get it. I need to drive enablement with sales, with my internal and cross functional teams. And then they go do it. And then nothing happens after that. The cyclical nature of her incorporating enablement into their flywheel, continuously delivering it, and her actually putting her like boots on the ground, her head in the conversation, like
Yeah.
talking with the sellers constantly, getting involved in their introductions. Like that is what makes change happen within organizations, is somebody consistently showing up and doing those things. And you've
Yeah.
taught them all the right things to go do. And she's actually actioning that over and over and over again.
Yeah. And I think that was part of their secret ingredient to their success was just really focusing heavily on enablement and knowing that it's not a one and done with a person. And like, I have to go back to that person and I'm going to need to have multiple conversations with them. Like, just one conversation isn't enough. And I can't say, okay, now you're enabled, right? It's like, I'm going to tell you some information. And then I'm going to sprinkle in the 201 layer of information when you're ready for it. And then in that moment, when you're really experiencing and needing it, I'm going to be there with you again, reiterating and doing it with you so that you really start to build that muscle.
And the marker for success being the sales reps going to her when she missed doing something and
Yeah.
saying,
He's
hey,
like,
by the way, I had to.
you told me you were going to do this.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
was awesome.
I
That
love
was
that
good.
accountability.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Unlock Cloud Go to Market with Marissa at HashiCorp. I'm your co-host, Erin Viger.
And I'm co-host Patrick Riley.
We'll see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Unlock Cloud Go to Market.